We'll be looking at some of the prerequisites that we'll need to do or know in order to do our probability unit. So today we're going to focus on looking at converting fractions into decimals and percents and then moving on from there. So as we're looking at fractions and decimals and percents, one thing that we need to know is that all of those things all express the same piece of information. They all mean the same thing. So we're going to do some practice using this table that we have in front of us here. And we're going to express each fraction in lowest terms. Okay, then we're going to use our calculator to express each fraction as both a fraction as well as a decimal. Okay, and then we're going to round our decimal answers to 2 decimal places if necessary. Okay, so, and then we're going to convert it finally as a percentage. So you'll notice here we have multiple fractions. We'll look at this first row here where our starting fraction is 5/8. Okay, so 5/8 is our starting fraction, and that's what we're going to be working with as we're taking a look at this piece. So we're going to see, do we need to turn this into lowest terms? Is there any number that both 5 and 8 can be divided by equally? Well, they can both be equally divided by 1, but they cannot be equally divided by 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or anything. Okay, so long as both of the numbers, the top number and the bottom number, cannot be divided equally by anything else, then the starting fraction actually stays the same. So our starting fraction actually stays as 5/8. Okay, so in lowest terms, it's already in lowest terms. Now, the way that this is written as a fraction also means that this is a division question. This line right here, okay, that actually means division. Okay, and so what we can do, what this means is actually 5 divided by 8. So we can write this out in a different way. So 5/8 is equal to 5 divided by 8. Okay, so what we want to do, we want to take that top number and divide it by the bottom number and turn it into a decimal number. So if I put in my calculator 5 divided by 8, it gives me 0.625. Okay, so nice, clean, easy decimal to work with. So 0.625. That is what 5/8 is as a decimal. Okay, so we can convert from a fraction into a decimal by dividing the top number by the bottom number. Now, we can also convert a fraction into a percentage, okay, by using that decimal piece of information that we have. Okay, a percentage represents a part of a whole. Okay, much like a fraction represents a part of a whole. So as a percentage, in order to convert a decimal into a percentage, we need to multiply it by 100. Okay, so you take your decimal answer, which in this case happens to be 0.625, and you want to multiply that by 100. Okay, and that will give you your answer as a percentage. So if I take 0.625 and I multiply it by 100, that gives me 62.5%. Okay, so that is how you convert 5/8 as both a decimal and into a percentage point. Okay, so let's roll down and take a look at the next example here. Okay, so the next example that we have is 16/30. Okay, so here again we have a fraction, and we want to see, can we put this into lowest terms? Well, lowest terms mean, is there a number that both of these things can be divided by multiple times? And if the two numbers, the number on the top and the number on the bottom, if they are both even numbers, then automatically they can be both divided by 2. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start going through and I'm going to start dividing by 2 until I can divide by 2 no more. So I start off with 16/30. If I divide by 2, okay, then that gives me 8/15. Okay, and I'm pretty sure that there's no number that is common to both 8 or 15. I can't divide both of them by 2 because 15 is not an even number. I can't divide both of them by 3 because 8 is not divisibly even by 3. 15 is, but 8 is not. I can't do it by 4. 8's divisible evenly by 4, and 15 is not. And I certainly can't divide both of them evenly by 5. So I can only divide both of them evenly by 2. So in this instance, my final fraction in lowest terms is actually 8 over 15. Okay, so 8 over 15 is my fraction in lowest terms. So now what I want to do is I want to convert that fraction into a decimal. Okay, so in this next column here, I'm going to take 8 over 15. Okay, and again, we said that's the same thing as saying 8 divided by 15. Okay, because the top number is divided by the bottom number. So if I take 8 divided by 15, that leaves me with 0.533333333. It keeps on going. So I'm going to put that repeating sign over top to indicate that the 3 just keeps on going to infinity. Okay, but I'm just going to leave it as 0.53, and we'll keep it to that point. Okay. The next thing I want to do, that next column to the right here, is I want to convert my decimal into a percentage. Okay, so I'm going to take this 0.53 and I'm going to turn it into a percentage by doing the same thing we did above. So above, we took our decimal and we multiplied it by 100 to get the percentage. Here we're going to do the same thing. We've got 0.53, repeating, times 100. Okay, and so when I take 0.53 repeating and I multiply that by 100, then I end up with 53.333333, keeps on going, repeating, and I'll just use that as a percentage. Okay, so it leaves me with 53.3%. Okay. Now we can go from a fraction all the way out to a percentage by going through the decimal, but we can also go the other way. Okay. It is entirely possible to go from a percentage into a decimal and then into a fraction. Okay. So the way that we do that, the way we go the other way, is we take our percentage, okay, and we're actually going to divide the percentage by 100. Okay, we're going to do the opposite operation. So just like when we were converting from a decimal into a percentage, we multiplied by 100. Now, in order to convert from a percentage into a decimal, we're going to divide by 100. So I'm going to take 65, that's my percent, and I'm going to divide it by 100. Okay, and that's the same as saying 65 divided by 100. Okay, so if I do 65 divided by 100 in my calculator, it's going to give me 0.65. Okay, so 0.65, that is my my decimal. Okay, now because I've actually written this as a fraction, this piece right here, the 65 over 100, okay, because I took 65% divided by 100, that percentage, or sorry, that fraction rather, I can use to convert this into lowest terms. So I'm actually going to move that fraction over to the next column, okay, and I'm going to continue to work with it. So I've got 65 over 100. Now, 100 is an even number, but 65 is not, so I can't divide both by 2. I can't divide 100 evenly by 3, so I'm not even going to try. I can't divide either one of them by, I can divide 100 evenly by 4, but I can't divide 65 evenly by 4 because 65 divided by 4 will give you some decimal number. But I can actually divide both of them by 5. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and divide both of these guys, both the top number and the bottom number, by 5. So if I take 65 divided by 5, that gives me 13. And if I take 100 and I divide that by 5, that gives me 20. Okay, and so I'm actually left with 13 over 20, and that's actually my fraction in lowest terms. Okay, I can't divide 13 and 20 evenly by any other numbers other than 1, and that just leaves it the same. So the starting fraction that I was working with is actually 13 over 20. Okay, and so using the skills of going from a fraction into a decimal and then from a decimal into a percentage, as well as going the other way, going from a percentage back into a decimal and going from a decimal into a fraction, is something that we are going to be doing quite often over the course of this next probability unit.